All right. Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the Highlands Biological Station. My name is Paige Engelbrektsson, and I am the Nature Center Education Specialist for the Highlands Biological Foundation. We're going to hang out for just a moment. Apologies, I'm watching the clouds roll in. We postponed from yesterday because it was unsafe weather conditions, and as long as it's just a sprinkle today, we should be fine. We are holding this as part of Balsam Mountain Trust's virtual Migratory Bird Day Fest. Originally intended to be a festival, but moved online with everything that's going on. And when they asked what we could do for a live stream, I thought about how important the western North Carolina mountains and the plateau that we sit on are for migrating birds. Many birds pass through this area, including our botanical garden specifically, on their way farther north or to stay here for the summer. And one of the things that I think about when I'm planning a long distance road trip is what snacks I'm going to pack. And migratory birds do not have that luxury. They have to depend on native plants having the right kind of food or the right kind of animals being prevalent wherever they're landing next. So today I thought we could talk a little bit about how native plants provide some important food sources for migrating birds. Welcome to those of you who are joining us. Please feel free to shout out in the chat where you're from. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them. I will do my best to answer them. And if I don't know the answer, I will do my best to find somebody who does. We are here on the 25-acre biological station, about half of which is our botanical garden. I am currently in what we call our meadow, which is set between some of our living areas. We're going to walk from the meadow up to the nature center and take a look at a few plants as we go. And the first one is actually right here. So I am focusing on this pretty straggly tree that's directly in front of me. Some of you may recognize it from other live streams that we've done in the past. And if it were in flower, as it was not too long ago, you would recognize it because those white flowers would be carpeting these branches. It would look like it was covered in snow. This is a dogwood. Hey Nicole, we are so glad to be sharing this for you guys. And we're just about to talk about our first plant, which is a flowering dogwood, and people love it for those flowers. State flower of many places. But what the birds are looking for is actually what those flowers are going to turn into. And so right here, each of these is at least on the plant's part, it's hoping that it's been fertilized. And they're going to turn into bright red berries. Those berries are jam-packed with nutrients, a lot of fats and proteins, and they will appear in August or October. I should say August through October, which is when a lot of birds are gearing up to migrate. So really stocking up on fats and proteins to last them for their long flights is critical. Christine is pointing out that dogwoods are the state tree of Virginia. This is true. You would think that I would remember that, hailing from Virginia, but these things happen. One of the cool things about migrating birds is how much their weight can increase as they're getting ready to go. And that's because oftentimes they're stocking up for incredibly long flights. And one of the birds that will come and feed on the berries here, like many others, will fly across the entire Gulf of Mexico in one night. So it has to have enough energy to make that flight, which you can imagine be pretty demanding. And that bird is one of my favorites. It has a beautiful metallic song that you hear when it comes back in the spring. I'm always sad to hear that song go, but I'm going to flip over and show you guys. It is the wood thrush. So it is this bird right here. It looks pretty inconspicuous, but if you've heard its song, you will remember it. It's metallic fluting. It's actually able to duet with itself. So keep an ear out and have a listen for it if you don't know it already. But a lot of fruit-eating birds will feed on the dogwood fruits and the fruits of other trees as well. In fact, right across the lawn from right here, we have what is a cherry of some kind or a serviceberry, whose fruits are just about to ripen. And these are the kinds of fruits that will feed birds throughout the summer. You can also find fruits on American hollies, for example, or sassafras trees, or even jack-in-the-pulpits. We're heading over to passing the serviceberry, which has primarily green fruits right now. So they're not quite ripe, you can see. These are ripening much earlier than the dogwoods will. Oh, there's one. One of the cool things about that coloration is how easily it stands out. So you can imagine if you've got a bright red berry, your point is to stand out for anybody that might be flying or passing by. You want them to see that, because not only are the birds going to eat the fruit, the fleshy part, and get that energy, your seeds are eventually going to exit the bird, hopefully in a suitable habitat. The food source that comes with this little tree in front of us does not appreciate being eaten by the birds. Any guesses what this little black oak might be harboring that migrating birds would be looking for as they're coming through? I'll give you a hint. If we take a look at the leaves, we might get some ideas. In the spring, when there are not a lot of fruits available, birds will come looking on this plant and others like it for what is hiding in these leaves. So migrating birds, Christina's guessing caterpillars. Caterpillars are certainly one option. Additionally, just other general insects will be typically hiding under the leaves. And in fact, I have probably the world's tiniest spider centered roughly in the middle of my palm right now. A lot of spiders will make their webs on oaks, as well as, for example, willows and cherries. So insect-eating birds will come and you'll see them. They'll land and then they'll actually seem to be looking underneath each leaf. Or, for example, on this much older red maple behind me, they'll be hopping up the bark, checking out to see what's tucked away where. So insects, definitely caterpillars if they're around. One interesting point about caterpillars is they typically have a host plant, something that they will eat. For example, monarchs are famous. Their caterpillars eat milkweed and very little else. So if you don't have milkweed, you don't have the monarch. That's one reason why native plants are awesome, because they're not only going to benefit the birds that might be eating their seeds, they're also going to benefit a whole complex web of other organisms that have evolved to have a relationship with that plant in some form. So whatever caterpillar is over here munching up this black oak and just really doing a number on a lot of its leaves. But one bird, a lot of warblers and vireos and tanagers are the kind of classic insect-eating birds that are looking for those insects in the spring. And one of those that we have here, I'm gonna let you guys look at the oak while I try and get this book open again. One of the birds that we actually have nesting here in the botanical garden is this handsome fellow and his lady friend. These are hooded warblers. They're pretty visually striking, and they like to hop around down low in the branches and not necessarily scold me, but definitely talk when we're walking through the garden. So these guys are, when they fly back up here, I bet you can guess, they fly north across the Gulf of Mexico in the spring, and then in the fall they'll go on a land route. They're heading to Central America, just like the wood thrush. I think about trying to make that journey, and it terrifies me, so I don't know how small birds do it. Nicole is pointing out that the hooded warblers are beautiful, and most warblers really are. They also look very similar, which can make them difficult to tell apart. I got a bird right yesterday in the botanical garden, one that I hadn't seen in a while, so it was very exciting. So we've covered fruits with our flowering dogwoods and other associated native plants. We've covered insects with our oaks, our willows, our cherries. And there's one more bird that has an unusual food source that I want to point out. It will eat insects, which you may not know because oftentimes we only think of them feeding off of this particular food source. But they are likewise dependent on that food being available when they make their long flights. So any guesses as to the bird and what its food source is? I will note I am deliberately leaving out meat-eating birds. The raptors are not part of this presentation. My apologies to them. So we are passing our pavilion, and we're going to head up towards our nature center if you've never been here before. Lynn is saying she has Blackburnian warblers eating insects in her white oak. Yes. That's awesome. I probably have a picture of Blackburnian warblers in here, but I'd need probably 2 hands to find them. So maybe at the end of the program so other folks can see what it is you're discussing. Nicole is guessing hummingbirds, and that is correct. For such little birds, they can go an awful long way, but they need a lot of energy to do that. So we're going to see a few plants that are native, that are really good food sources for them. So the food source that I'm thinking of is right here. And just looking at it visually, what do you notice? Because there are a few key characteristics that tell me this is a food source for hummingbirds. I'll go show you another example real fast. Here's another one. This is a different plant, but it shares some of the same characteristics that tell me this is a plant that has designed this flower specifically for hummingbirds. So Lynn is saying it's red. Yes, insects do not see red. They won't even notice that color, but our hummingbirds do. And Christine and Nicole are pointing out the shape of their flowers. If you imagine a hummingbird beak, that is a perfect fit for their long beaks with their tongue sticking out the end to get the nectar that's tucked way back here, a little bit too far back for most bees and other insects. So these red flowers, similar to the berries, are very eye-catching. We have that original viney plant right here as well. Think about how long your beak and then your tongue have to be to get the nectar out from the base of that flower. This is a flower that's screaming for hummingbirds. And that is trumpet honeysuckle or Corgel honeysuckle, and eastern columbine was the other plant that we were looking at. And these guys are buffets, while I flip, for this hummingbird at the top. That big ruby throat, that's what it's named for. It is the ruby-throated hummingbird. This is a male. The females have a white chin rather. And they are the only hummingbird that breeds here on the East Coast. So if you have hummingbirds living around your property or at your feeders, this is the bird that you're attracting. Hummingbirds do eat insects as well. A lot of people don't realize that and think they subsist entirely off of nectar from flowers, but they do get a little bit of protein. And I just have to stop and think about a bird that's about as big as my thumb and weighs less than, I believe it's a dime, making a flight all the way across the Gulf of Mexico. It's just absolutely incredible. And they are really hoping that the time that they make it to wherever they're going, whether they're coming north in the spring or heading south in the fall, that the flowers are going to be ready for them when they get there. And that's part of that relationship that these birds and plants have. Climate change is messing with that a little bit, but as a rule of thumb, at least in the past, when the birds have landed here, they've landed at the time that their food sources are ready. So we've talked about berries and fruits, we've talked about insects, we've talked about nectar, and there's a fourth and final food source that is just right over here. So I'm going to go show you guys real fast. If you have any questions, please make sure to drop them in the chat. Or any comments about whether you have hummingbirds at your property. For those of you who are not familiar, this building right here is our nature center. We got a shot of it as I was coming up the amphitheater. It was finished actually in 1941, and has been a nature center all its years. So these are our pollinator beds out here. You can see we have a number of different plants that have been flowering, and they've changed over time which plants are flowering. And I am just waiting for this one to pop off, because when it does, it's going to be amazing. Right now, I will tell you guys, those of you who may know me in person, this is about hip high. Hello, Connie, welcome. And this is actually pretty short for this plant. When this plant is done growing, it will be taller than me. In fact, it will be falling over into the trail. It will be so tall. Any guesses as to what kind of flower we may know of that we can grow agriculturally that tends to grow really tall and has yellow petals, and at the center produces a food source that I personally love to snack on, especially on road trips, but that a lot of birds depend on as well. This is a tall sunflower. It's Helianthus giganteus. And yes, Christine has guessed it, it's sunflower. So this is in the same group. The sunflowers that we grow for people use are oftentimes bigger than my head, but these are small flowers. They're just about palm-sized, if that. And there will be many of them branching off of the same stem late in the fall. It'll just be a huge display of color here in the garden. And hopefully they're pollinated by insects, and then those seeds will form in the middle, and the whole plant will die at that point. So we'll have this huge dead stem, lots of branching bits with these big round heavy weights at the end of each, well, a little stem. And you might think that that's not very aesthetically pleasing, which is true. But here at the Botanical Garden, we don't think only about aesthetics. We think about that complex relationship that birds have with our native plants. And we'll leave these seed heads up all year round, because migrating birds that are seed eaters need fuel just as much as our other birds. So a lot of finches and grosbeaks, you might find them at your feeder picking out sunflower seeds there. These are native sunflowers that are ready-made for them, no human involvement necessary. I actually watched some goldfinches picking out seeds earlier, far earlier, before they were dying, officially done, and the new growth was coming up, at which point we did remove the seed heads because the birds were here already. But just you watch these little birds perch on these big seed heads and actually bow the plant a little bit and pull out individual seeds to eat, and it's really cool. So if you have the capacity to plant sunflowers in your area, whether it's a small patch of land or a pot on a porch, heaven knows I'm doing a lot of potted gardening right now, try it, let the flower grow, let it die, and then wait to see who comes. Because native plants are great food sources, hopefully you've got that, but they're also really good for us as people. I'm going to show you, Connie has also pointed sunflowers, sorry I missed that. All of these are native plants that will all be blooming and growing at some point in the future. And when it happens to be a dry year, or even a dry week, we are not out here with hoses. We are not out here with sprinklers. Because these plants have evolved to live in this kind of habitat, we have very little human investment on our part once they're established. They can tolerate a lot of the slings and arrows that this environment throws at them. We don't need to use pesticides, we don't need to use herbicides, we don't need to use excessive amounts of water. So native plants are great because they require few resources on our part. You can see this is our main street out in front of our nature center. And they also are going to offer a lot of benefits to the animals in your area. I did want to mention before I forgot, other plants that hummingbirds, I want to kind of give you guys an idea about what you could plant. Bee balm is one, and jewelweed, which we've got growing around here now, is going to be an important food source for them in the fall. A lot of asters and coneflowers that are native to our area are really important seed heads. So you can find out, if you're interested, what native plants will benefit what kinds of birds in your area. I know that Balsam Mountain Trust posted a resource earlier that I actually used to work up some of this program. Audubon Society has a 700 plant database that you can actually search your zip code in, and it'll tell you what the plant it is, it'll show you a picture, tell you a little bit about it, and what kinds of birds it might attract. Whether because it's a good source of food, it's a good place for nesting, it offers good nesting material the way that cinnamon ferns do for hummingbirds, for example. And it's really cool. There's also some authors out there who are doing a lot of work on this subject. Doug Talamy is one of them, and I will do my best to find a resource, link to that, and post it in the comments to this if you're interested. He has a book called Gardening for the Birds. Just what you can do in however small or large a space you have to give your native birds a little bit of a boost. So that is the bulk of my presentation for today, my live stream. I hope you guys have enjoyed it and seen me and the bits of the garden. Any questions, any thoughts? Anybody itching to go out and find some native plants from the local nurseries and plant them? I just let my yard run wild, so all the natives are happy as campers. Thank you for that floating little heart. I appreciate that. Christina's asking about starlings. What do they eat? Oh, yes, and blackberry and warblers. Okay, I'm going to sit down for a moment to make this a little easier, and you can watch me go through my guidebook. It is an older guidebook, but it still is a good source for the basics, and all those photos are a great option. Starlings. So under their head. Balsam Mountain Trust. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I hope it was informative. Kenny, thank you very much for the compliment. That is definitely appreciated. I love doing these because I always learn a little bit more as I'm going. Starlings. Maybe I switched to the wrong page. I will look that up, Christine, and get back to you. My guess is that they're probably insectivores. That's the majority of birds when you really get down to it. Fruit eating is special. You digest fruits really fast. Anybody who's been sitting watching cedar waxwings or cardinals eating fruit off of a tree will notice that they are defecating quite quickly because the fruits, the sugars just dissolve so fast. So usually the bulk of birds are, if not meat eating, then insect eating. And I'm gonna look to see if I can find the Blackburnian warbler real fast. You can see all of the beautiful warblers. There are many of them. Canada, but yeah, thank you all for watching. I'm gonna try and find that. Black-throated, Blackburnian warbler. Okay, so compared to the others, a little bit duller in color, but that orange throat is definitely a good field sign. Okay, Kenny is mentioning that starlings in Utah eat suet like crazy. Definitely a lot of fats there, which sounds about right. So my favorite fact about starlings that I assume most starlings do, but definitely the ones in my backyard did, is that they all gather together in the same tree at the same time every day. So I could literally set my clock by 4:39 p.m. because that's when all of the starlings would come back and start making a racket. They are not native to North America. They were introduced, I believe, with the gentleman who thought he would bring all of the birds that Shakespeare mentioned and set them loose in Central Park, introducing invasive species. So they've naturalized. They're here now. We're not getting rid of them. But they are beautiful, especially when they have their new plumage, because they're these tiny little white tips at the end of their feathers, so they look like they're covered in stars. Those wear off, actually, which is why they appear to change color, and I think it's by springtime they appear to be really dull. Okay, I could nerd out a little bit more on birds, but I think that is it. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciated the chance to get to talk to you and show you around. And hope that you enjoy birding at home. Take care. Bye.